Blackjack is the extremely popular casino game that's played all around the world. Standard blackjack typically gives you the best odds of winning out of all the casino games that exist. It's personally my favorite game to play, and it's the game I used in the short version of cashing out that I call Double Down. Today, I'm going to teach you all of the basics to give you confidence to sit down at a table and win your hands. First, we must understand how the game works. The biggest misconception about blackjack is that a player must get 21. While getting a 21 is definitely a surefire way of possibly winning your hand, the object of the game is to actually beat the dealer. The way to beat the dealer is to have a hand that's higher ranking than their current hand, or for the dealer to draw over a 21. We'll get more into the rules for the dealer here in a minute. Blackjack uses a standard 52 card deck, but most casinos typically use 6 to 8 decks. If a casino uses more than 2 decks, they're usually held in a shoe like this. However, a lot of casinos have adopted to using an automatic shuffler machine. I generally try to avoid tables with an automatic shuffler, but sometimes you might not have a choice. In games that use a card shoe, the dealer will deal cards out until the deck reaches the penetration point. Yes, I know, but that's what it's called, which is usually around 3/4 or more of all the decks combined. After the cards are shuffled, the dealer will ask one of the players at the table to cut the cards using a card cutter and then use that card to penetrate the deck. This is used as a mark so the dealer knows when to reshuffle the decks. The values of the cards are pretty standard. Aces are obviously highest and 2s are the lowest. However, in blackjack, aces can be read as 1 or 11, and face cards, such as king, queen, or jack, are read as 10s. As I mentioned earlier, in order to win, you will have to have a higher ranking hand than the dealer, or the dealer will have to bust. The rules will vary from casino to casino, but the most common rule is that the dealer will have to deal themselves cards up to a hard 17. Basically, what that means is if they have a soft 17, which would be an ace and a 6, they would still have to draw another card until they at least hit a hard 17, which in that case would be an ace, a 6, and a 10. Basically, when it comes to a 17 for the dealer, they can't use an ace to act as an 11. On the other side, an example of the dealer busting would be them making a hand of anything over 21. The dealer has no choice but to deal themselves cards until they at least get 17. So, for instance, if they have a 16, such as a 10 and a 6, they draw another card, which happens to be a 10, then they would bust with a 26. The maximum a player or the dealer can have as far as their cards is a 21. To begin play, a player that wants to participate has to sit down at a table and make the minimum bet that is required by the casino. Typically, with your local casino, the betting range would be a minimum of $10 to $15, but there's also a lot of games that begin at $5. Most casinos will also have a maximum bet, which will be predetermined and written down at each of the tables. They have to have all of this information clearly laid out for the players. So if you'd like to play, you have to at least put the minimal amount inside of the betting circle. Once all of the participating players have made their bets, the dealer will then begin dealing cards. The dealer will deal one face-up card to each of the players until each player has made a 2-card hand. Although there's an asterisk to that because the dealer only has one face-up card, and then they also have one face-down card, which is known as the hole card. If the dealer's face-up card is an ace or a 10, they are required to check their hole card to see if they have blackjack. If the dealer has a 10 and an ace in the hole card, then everybody automatically loses unless they also have blackjack. However, if the dealer's up card is an ace, they are required to ask all of the players if they would like insurance. Insurance is when the dealer will give you half of your bet back if you think they have blackjack. However, if you do this, you will have to forfeit your hand. Taking insurance is generally something that I don't recommend doing, so I'm not going to get any further into it. Once all the cards have been dealt, the player to the left of the dealer will be the first person to act. If a player hits blackjack on their hand and the dealer does not have blackjack, they will automatically win. The most common payout ratio for blackjack is 3 to 2, which is 1.5 times your bet. So for instance, if you bet $10, get blackjack, you will win 15. If you do not have blackjack, you will typically have 4 other playing options depending on which hand you have. The first move is you can stand, which means you do not want any more cards and you're happy with where your hand is at. The second move would be to hit, which is where you want the dealer to deal you another card to hopefully better your hand. You can generally hit as many times as you want as long as you do not go over 21. The third option would be to double down, which is where you double your initial bet. We'll get more into the rules of double downing later. The fourth option would be to split, which is when you have two identically ranked hands and you're able to split them, basically double your bet, but you play them as if they're separate hands. Side note, when you're splitting, you're basically playing this as if they're two new hands. You can stand, you can hit, and you can double down as well, and sometimes you can even resplit. However, depending on the casino rules, if you are splitting aces, generally they will only allow you to get one card for each hand. Once each of the players have made their decisions on how to act on their hands, the dealer will be the last person to make their move. As I mentioned earlier, the dealer must draw to at least a hard 17. If the dealer busts, all the remaining players will win at the table. If the dealer does not bust, they're required to pay out the higher ranking hands, take chips away from the lower ranking hands, and push on the equally ranking hands. A push means that the player neither wins or loses their initial bet. Now let's get into all the different types of hands you can run into. As I mentioned earlier, an ace is either read as a 1 or 11. If you receive a blackjack, which is an ace and a 10, and the dealer does not have a blackjack, you're going to get automatically paid. Side note, I mentioned that most casinos pay out a 3-to-2 ratio, but some other casinos pay out a 6-to-5 ratio, which is less than that 1.5 times bet. I generally try to avoid these tables, but sometimes you really don't have a choice. You can get two identically ranked cards, such as 10s, 9s, 8s, and so on. A soft hand is an ace plus any card that is a 9 or below. If you have a more marginal card with your ace, such as a 2 through 6, you can hit without having to worry about busting. This is generally a good starting hand because if you have the 11 plus something like a 7, 8, or 9, you're generally in a good place. There are some basic guidelines that you're going to want to follow when you go to any blackjack game. Playing perfect basic strategy will give you the best odds at playing at the table. If you play perfect basic strategy, for every 100 hands you will win about 40% of the time, push about 10% of the time, and lose about 50% of the time. So if this game is set up for you to lose, how are you going to win at it? Well, one of the best ways to do that is to come up with a betting range strategy. You want to bet high for the hands that you think you're going to win, and bet low for the hands that you think you're going to lose. I must note that this isn't going to work 100% of the time, but this is going to give you the best odds in the game. Now let's get into the basic strategy of how you should play your hands. Rule number 1, always assume that the dealer's whole card is a 10. If you assume the dealer's whole card is always a 10, they will bust more often on marginal hands and win more often on better hands. This will give you a better approach as to how to play your own hand. Next, always assume that the card to be dealt next is a 10. So let's go through an example. The dealer is showing a 15. We know that the dealer has to hit till at least 17. So if we assume that the next card that comes out of the shoe is a 10, we know that the dealer is going to bust their hand and we're going to win. This works for us as well as we're trying to make a decision with our own hand. So for example, if we're holding a 12 in our own hand and we assume that the next card to come out is going to be a 10, we know that we're going to bust. This gives us the ability to make a better conscious decision. If the dealer is holding a 10 up card, we assume that the whole card is a 10 as well for a total of 20. We know that our 12 is not going to beat that. We would want to hit in this situation because we run the risk of losing no matter what we do. We have a better chance of winning in this situation than losing because we can always hit a card like an 8 or a 9 and at minimal push. Rule number 3, always double down when you have an 11 no matter what the dealer's up card is. If we use our previous rule of assuming the next card dealt will be a 10, then we have better chances of doubling our money. Rule number 4, always double on a 10 unless the dealer's up card is a 10 or an ace. A 10 is a great hand to have, but it doesn't always hold up against another 10 or an ace. Rule number 5, always split aces and 8s. I never quite understood the 8s rule, but you should definitely always split aces. Pretty much any chance to double your money when the dealer has a marginal hand is a great scenario to split. Rule number 6, when the dealer is holding a good up card, such as 7 through ace, the player should not stop having cards dealt to them until at least they hit 17. Again, this is using some of our earlier rules to determine our best outcome of winning the hand. If we hold a 13 and we assume that the dealer has a 17, we're not going to win the hand, so we want to draw another card to maximize our chances of winning. Rule number 7, when the dealer's up card is a poor one, such as 2 through 6, we should stop drawing at 12. Again, using the first couple rules that we have, if the dealer's up card is a 2, for instance, they have to draw to at least 17. If we assume that the next dealt card is a 10, they're going to bust with 22. We'd rather have the dealer bust on their hand and not our own. Rule number 8, when the player has a soft hand, they should draw to at least a soft or hard 18. 18 is a pretty solid hand, so if you have an ace and a 7, I would definitely recommend standing. But if you have an ace and anything below a 7, I would definitely recommend hitting to maximize your chances of winning. Rule number 9, if your first 2 cards equal a 9, you should double down if the dealer has a marginal hand. Rule number 10, if you hold a soft hand, it's good to double down if the dealer has a marginal hand, such as 2 through 6. Rule number 11, do not split 10s. 20 is usually a difficult hand for the dealer to beat, so we definitely don't want to risk losing that. And rule number 12, if you hold a pair of 9s, it's generally good to split that hand if the dealer's holding a marginal hand such as 2 through 6. So that's just a brief summary of basic strategy in blackjack. This is just a general idea of what you should do in most hands that you're going to run into during the game. However, I definitely recommend studying a basic strategy chart which outlines all the rules that you should follow for every hand that you're going to run into. I'll leave a link in the notes for some basic strategy charts that I've used in the past. The basic strategy that you should use will vary from how many decks are played in the game. However, if you can remember how to play 6-deck basic strategy, you'll be able to nail any blackjack game. Finally, let's get into some table etiquette. There are definitely some good blackjack etiquette rules that you should follow when sitting at the table. First, you should generally avoid playing in the middle of a shoe. When you first sit down at a table, if there's already a game going mid-shoe, you should wait until there's a reshuffling point. How people feel about this will vary from player to player, but for me personally, I generally wait until there's a reshuffling point. Number 2, play at a table where players are playing a similar bankroll as you. If you come up to a table and there's people playing thousands of dollars and you're only planning on playing 20 or 30, I would generally avoid playing at that table. However, if people are playing thousands of dollars at a table and you only plan on playing a couple of hundred, if you're playing perfect basic strategy, generally you don't have to worry about that kind of thing. If you're playing exactly how you should, nobody can fault you for making a bad move. 3, play perfect basic strategy based on what type of table you're playing. You might make a mistake from time to time, which isn't a huge deal, but if you're continuously making bad moves, that's generally frowned upon. And that leads me into my last piece of advice. Number 4, don't tell people what to do. If people are making bad moves, let them make bad moves. It's not going to affect your play if you're playing 100% perfectly. And if you tell them how to play and they lose, that can lead to some confrontations that you don't want to get involved with. I guess there's a 5th option, but it's not really an etiquette option. You can leave the blackjack table at any time. However, if you're leaving with $200 worth of chips, you want to try to consolidate those as much as possible. You don't want to be walking around with an obvious pocket full of chips. At most blackjack tables, there's going to be 5 different color values. There's going to be white chips, which are typically worth $1. You're going to have $2.50 chips, which I forgot the color, so I'm not exactly sure which color it is. You have red chips, which are typically worth $5. You have green chips, which are typically worth $25, and then you have black chips, which are typically worth $100. Again, if you just hand the dealer your chips and ask them to color up, they're going to give you the most consolidated amount of chips possible. And actually, one more piece of etiquette that I forgot about. When you want to receive chips at a table, you will sit down and hand the dealer how much money you want to play with. However, I wouldn't hand the dealer money in the middle of a hand. For 1, they won't take it, and 2, it looks extremely rude. You will get your chips, just be patient. Blackjack is a really fun game. It can be intimidating at first, but as you practice it more and more, it's eventually going to become second nature. If you take the time to perfect basic strategy, you're going to look and feel like a good player. So hopefully this video gave you some confidence to be able to go sit down at a blackjack table. Be sure to watch Cashing Out. If you go to our website, www.cashingoutfilm.com, you'll be able to see all of the platforms it's currently playing on. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you at the tables.